You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey folks, it's Kevin. Welcome to show 201 of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I'm Kevin, the engineer, the guy who generally reads instructions, uses the right tools, and follows the instructions most of the time. And as our new discussion says, at least when I deviate, I know that I'm responsible for the results.
And I'm Scott. I'm the slapstick parts guy on a continuing mission to not only derail this train of this guy's thought, and also derail my own trains of trying to speak.
And mumble your words.
Exactly. I'm like the word blender. Just going to throw it all in there, mix it all up, and next thing you know, you got word soup. So with that, while we always will share what worked for us, as well as what didn't, like trying to talk, it's always up to you to do your research and read the instructions.
Hey guys, welcome to show 2 of the new year.
Yes.
Thanks for the positive feedback on show 1 of the new year. That was kind of an interesting. And this time we're going to kind of wander down a similar techie, maybe not quite so deep, but we do have some things to talk about for you for the New Year's, as well as share some, what do I call it? Experiences, and well as questions from one of our more
animated
listeners, yes, who contacts us regularly, and we really appreciate that very, very much.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to turn it over to Scott because he made a request of me, but I figured you guys need to hear the story, and Scott's really good at that kind of stuff.
Well, the message, as a aforementioned message, is also titled with Kevin, I Need an Adult. I've said those words more than once. George, thank you so much for your email.
Yes.
And it was very funny. Scenario yesterday on the trail. Don't worry, we didn't copyright, so you're good. I found fresh, unbroken powder. And as Kevin would explain what powder would be for those people living not in Florida.
Yeah. That's
that's right.
Snow.
Yeah, that's snow
Frozen
for you
water.
Floridians. As beheft the situation, I revved Hank 05LJ inline 6 4.0 170 kilowatts or power, whatever it is, to somewhere a little north of 4,000 RPM. Oh yeah, miles. That's probably
170,000 miles.
Yeah, hey, the same as quantum entanglement. Just a little north of 4,000 RPMs, and proceeded to saw back and forth the steering wheel, pushing snow with the bumper to clear the trail of all of the other for all the other off-roading enthusiasts.
Not clearing the other riders.
You're the one that made me read this. For all the other off-roading enthusiasts, both behind me as well as not yet on the trail. Spurring caution that some of the ATV guys on the GMRS said it's impassable, I soldiered on and made it through a few drifts on the high clearing and ripped into the woods to my delight. The next vehicle got stuck in the long drift, and the rest of the party decided, you know what, as late as it was getting, perhaps caution would be better. Part of the reason to retreat back to town the way they came. Party poopers. So, while I sat about half a mile away in the woods on flat ground at idle, listening to the two-way, awaiting news, letting the engine cool down from the north of 240 degrees that the exertion had understandably led to, the stern check gauges light and bell signaled, and I looked down to see what what my wondering eyes that appear was to see what the triggered the alarm. In fact, it wasn't admittedly the high temp, but the oil pressure had dropped to 0. I bumped the gas and pressure bumped back up to the standard, and then when I fell back to idle, the pressure once again cratered. I set the Kentucky Cruise Control to 1,200 RPMs to restore oil pressure, waiting a few minutes, looking in vain for a reserve quart of oil, and then dropped back to idle. Normal strong oil pressure had resumed. So what the heck just happened? I had checked the oil before the trip. There's a puddle of each. No, he didn't say that. I ad-libbed that. And we were just a tad above the ad line, so I decided to throw a quart in upon my return. I just checked it this morning, and now it's firmly at the add line as expected. What? That
two things
is a great
happened,
message.
George. That's a great message and written in fabulous vernacular. I love it. What basically happened was your oil volume obviously leaked a little bit, as you noted, since you threw a quart in when you got home, and it's firmly at the add line as expected. One would hope it'd be at the full line, but the thing is you have to understand that if your engine temperature is at 240, oil is actually an engine's primary coolant, not the water. This is hard for people to understand, but oil takes away more high temperature because it's directly in contact with the bottom of the pistons. So, and it can run anywhere from 50 to 100 degrees hotter than the water. And it was really hilarious because I'm reading this email. Scott said, "Oh, you got to go read George's email." And so I'm reading it. We had just got done having a discussion, which we will cover later, about the API temperature numbers and the designations on oil and some things that we'll talk about later. And the point is, what happened, George? You overheated your oil and you got the viscosity down along with volume down to the point that your pump cavitated. And when you rev up enough, you were pushing the frothy, thin as skim milk oil up around, hopefully keeping your bearings afloat, because that's really what you're trying to do with oil, is float your bearings so that they don't touch metal to metal, until it finally, in that lovely cold snow, finally cooled down enough to resume some level of normal viscosity, in which case the pump then was able to get a grab on it and run. Because with 170K, unless you've replaced that oil pump, I guarantee you the tolerances are probably at best the wide end of normal, and most likely somewhat past normal, and therefore not quite as efficient at picking up thin liquids.
Yeah.
I would personally recommend an oil and filter change after that event, just to make sure that some of those slightly singed petroleum lubricant molecules are replaced with something with a little more shear strength.
Yeah.
Love your writing style, though, George. Absolutely great. If you didn't hear squealing, squalling, grinding, and the usual sounds of mayhem that come from the underhood area of the usual 4-liter during high stress situations, you probably didn't do any real damage. But when you change the oil, be sure to double check for man glitter floating in it. And if it's got a heavy silver sheen, you may want to, I know you're not going to like this, drop the pan, select a bearing, one main, and at least one connecting rod, pull it off, and see if you burn through your babbitt on your bearings. And if you're seeing any of the copper or anything like that, you may want to look at replacing your lower end bearings and possibly even cam bearings. And yes, what I'm talking about is kind of a backyard overhaul. Yeah. But either that or you do like most people and you run it till it drops.
Hey, babbitt.
Yeah, well, no. But that's the silver material that you see that everything spins on. But anyway, again, thanks so much for emailing us and then sharing your experience as well as your question. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I was going to say, because when he asked me, I said, well, maybe you got a piece of trash that worked itself loose and got in the oil pressure sensor and doing that. When Kevin said, cavitated his oil, I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That's why that guy is smarter than me. But but he's right, though, because we talk about
smarter. I've just made more mistakes than you have.
Well, but we also talk about coolant when it gets low, cavitation and coolant and things like that. That I'm aware of. That I know all about. Yeah. But I didn't even think about
engine kind of gear pump. Now, you got a little gear pump down there that the gears intermesh. Each one's probably only about an inch to an inch and a quarter in diameter. That's sitting there trying to grab the oil and sling it around the outsides of each side and push it along. And it is not a positive displacement pump style. It's not a piston pump. You know, it's a gear pump, and it's close. It's a near fixed displacement, but The teeth do not actually wipe against the side of the case. If you can picture a gear turning like a tank track against the ground, all right, you're not touching the ground exactly. And if the stuff that's between the gear can get pushed, but there's still room for it to slip back past it if the viscosity of the material is too thin.
Right.
And that's what happens. And you cannot build the pressure necessary. Now, the good news and why you didn't tell me that it went boom is most likely the oil was, in fact, circulating. All right. But it was very thin, and it did not have enough pressure and backbone to push the plunger on your oil switch. Okay. There's a very simple plunger type switch on your oil system. It's on the side of the block over on the passenger side, and it's a contact switch, and it's essentially a ball with a spring behind it. And if there's enough pressure, the ball is pushed away from its seat and electrical contact is broken. So it's not grounded. But as soon as the oil pressure is less than the pressure from the spring, the ball is pushed against its seat, okay, which is in the very end of that fitting, sitting in the oil gallery, makes contact, and 12 volts to that turns on your oil light, sends the alarms, tells the computer, you're dying. So it's doing its job is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's just, but when you think about it, you can still flow oil throughout the entire system. It just doesn't have the viscosity to keep the pressure up.
Right.
All right.
No, that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm curious what the outside temperature was that you could pump up to 240 degrees in the coolant in the snow. Well, I'm surprised you didn't. Maybe you did have a very large green circle around your Jeep as it sat there and the flowers started to bloom.
I mean, you tricked her to thinking it was spring already. Well, maybe we'll have to have him on one day to find out.
I lived up in that neck of the woods for a long time.
Yes. So, Kevin, how you been, man? What's been going on with you? What you been up to lately?
Oh, well, guys, it's funny Scott asks that, although he has an insider track on that information.
Aha.
Yes, I was asked to come over and assist one of my friends who runs a Jeep fab shop. It's Red Scorpion Fab Works. And Ron and the crew. And Ron takes on a lot of the jobs that a lot of shops won't touch, including a very pretty looking red, I believe it was an 84, might have been 85, but doesn't really matter anymore, CJ8, better known as a Scrambler. And this Scrambler looks very good, and the body is in pretty good shape. Okay, no craters, no holes. The frame, on the other hand, was not so hot.
Yeah.
It was crumbling. And in addition to that, the engine was in pretty bad shape. And it had a 4-speed transmission, which was fine. But again, it wasn't optimum. So he came in kind of heart in hand, and Ron set him up, and they did an entire frame transplant. Now, I'm not sure where the donor frame came from because CJ8s were very rare. They weren't popular when they were made, but now they're kind of, a lot of people think they're the cat's meow.
They're the OG LJ.
Yeah, that's true. And so what happened, though, was it's one of those builds that kind of took on a life of its own. So they got a frame. Oh, they got the frame. Oh, gee, look at that. We need to put axles and springs. So they put axles and springs. Oh, let's go ahead and, the frame came with a new engine that just been overhauled and a 5-speed transmission. So let's make that fit in the Jeep that it didn't come with. Okay. Let's go ahead and replace the fuel tank and the fuel senders, and, the wiring looks like crap now.
Oh,
so
while we're
let's
there.
go. Yeah, while we're there, let's replace the wiring harness. Oh, while we're at it, let's go ahead and put in a Jeep Hut dash set. And if you use in the CJ world, that's a great system, but it's a modern electronic dash system. It looks just like the old CJ, the big round circle in the middle with the 4 micro gauges, and then the separate oil and the temperature and the voltage. But they're all state-of-the-art, components. And then they opened the boxes and somebody started laying it out and they went, they don't work together. There's no plug for this and that. And this doesn't reach here. And how come that has one pin and this has 3 pins?
Sound familiar, guys?
And Ron goes, 1-800-KEVIN. Help.
1-800-237-EMPIRE. Sorry, that's stuck in my head.
Yeah. So long story short, it was about a good solid 5 days of work. First day was I didn't do a thing but sit there and bash my head against a multimeter and try to trace out the untraceables, discover what was done, what wasn't done, how things were supposed to work. And I'm not going to mention brand names, but they did not make what I would consider the best choice for the main wiring harness replacement. The components are okay, but instead of a regular firewall fuse box that are in CJs, YJs ad nauseum and very easy to get, so I don't know why the manufacturers chose not to do this. They came up with a custom firewall pass-through, more like a Ford unit, and a circuit board that just mounts to the inside of the firewall just above your left foot with an aluminum or stainless steel cover on it. And all the fuses are fuse bases that are just soldered to a PC board. And if you miss a pedal shift and your foot slides off the clutch, you're going to crush your fuse box and dump the entire voltage into the floorboards, which is going to be interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Zap.
But that also comes from the fact that then we discovered, as I'm sitting there tracing this out, that wait a minute, the good news, he did buy it for his body style, but his frame and engine are later years. So whereas his had an ignition system that was originally a low current, what's called a 912 coil system with standard points and a ballast resistor to give you the 9-volt run, 12-volt crank spark. This engine came with the GM hi-hat coil pack on distributor, which pulls 25 or more amps. The wiring in the harness was not going to be capable of carrying the ignition system on the engine. So it was just those kinds of lovely little, all right, let's go from there. The other thing was the manufacturer's information said, well, here's all the wires in the engine compartment. But what about the dash and the lighting and the turn signals and the fuel tank? You guys are hearing as much as I heard. I went in, and even the color, there was not a single wiring layout, no schematics, no diagrams. So it was not wonderful. So what I ended up doing was creating one. That was the first day. It was, okay, this chart doesn't have a pink wire in the chart telling me what it's supposed to be, but there's a pink wire here. What's the pink wire? Turns out the pink wire was the gas gauge feed from the tank sensor back up in the harness. Problem is that the Speed Hut gauge set had a 2-wire gas gauge harness. Oof. And the aftermarket harness only had a single wire, which was correct for the original Jeep, so I can't blame them. Same thing, it had a single wire temperature, a single wire oil. Well, the Speed Hut needed a 3-wire oil sender and a 2-wire rate temperature sensor. And you get the picture here? So I'm mapping out, okay, what goes away, what gets replaced, and how do I get there from here? Got probably 80% of the wired laid out the second day, a good solid 8+ hours, 9 hours of running cables and then pulling them back and rerunning them to get them to reach, replacing sender units. Fortunately, Speed Hut does send you the new compliant sensors to put in there, and I was impressed because I was deathly afraid. The last one I did with Speed Hut gauges, the water temperature sensor was for the late model 4 liters, which have the temperature sensor up in the thermostat housing. You know where I'm talking about, Scott.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But the early engine blocks had the temperature sensors in the back of the head in the steam vent hole. And by happenstance, we did get a set from Speed Hut, bless their souls, with the correct small diameter temperature sensor in the back of the head. So that small crisis was averted. And we then went from there going through, all right, how do I terminate? What am I feeding from where? How do I get this set up? Oh, gee, the harness didn't include the placard lighting. And a lot of you more modern Jeepers will go, what the heck's placard lighting?
Yeah.
Well, in the CJ world, the dash faces were lit, but all of your little buttons like wiper, washer, blower settings, and all that stuff has no built-in lighting.
Yeah.
So there's little rectangular placards above or below those controls with little blue film pictures of a wiper and a washer and all these things, and they come on with the dash lights. And if you don't have them powered and you're driving in the dark, you can see how fast you're going, but you don't know where to reach to turn your wipers on. So,
randomly pulling buttons. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it was that kind of a trip, and then moved on to the next day and finished trying to wire the dash in such a way that I could then install the dash. And we got that in. And then, of course, the speed hut, everything has to be calibrated. So it's like, what is the ohmage of the tank? What is this? What is that? We managed to get all of that sorted out. The old classic word is one wire at a time, wire at a time. And then you have to harness it, because the last thing you want to do is spend all this time on that stuff and have it fall on the back of the head and melt.
Yeah.
Scott, we remember where mine was a factory harness that was improperly laid in that was on the back of the head and melted.
Mm-hmm. That caused you a little bit of eye twitching.
Oh, yeah. Well, I used to, every time I do a water crossing, I would blow my backup light fuse.
Mm-hmm.
Never failed. And I finally found out that the problem wasn't in the back of the Jeep where I was looking. It was all the way up at the back of the head in the engine compartment.
Yeah.
So let's see. Once we got that done and we actually got the wiring finished, we did have to, like I said, we abandoned a lot of stuff in place, factory style. You heat shrink at the end of a clean cut of wire. You don't leave any fuzzy wire pieces. You just insulation cut clean. Slide a piece of heat shrink over it, shrink it tight, get it good and warm, and then squeeze the end. Leave a quarter to eighth of an inch hanging over past the end of the wire. Squeeze it with pliers, and it forms a very tight, watertight seal at the end of the wire. And you wind it up in the harness with the rest of the wires. And before you go, oh, that's horrible, you need to peel them out, go open up a factory harness. You're going to find those blanked all over the place.
Yeah.
And I would have probably peeled them out, by the way, for the purists, except that particular brand harness and its through harness connectors, the fittings are soldered. They're not push-in pins that you could disconnect. So abandoning it in place was probably the least evil of all the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I talk about when you're doing these builds and you're mixing components. You really have to pay attention to the details to have a successful outcome.
Yeah.
We got them all done, and I was very pleasantly surprised that, I don't usually expect you to turn the key and have it fire, but we turned the key on this thing, and within 2 revolutions, it came to life. It still needs, the owner has taken it back because this was not a turnkey build. This was a help me through these parts. I want to do some of the work myself. He still has to do a final bleed on his brakes. He still has to we get the carburetor adjusted. Maybe he needs to call Riley's Rebuilds and see, see if she could do that, because it doesn't have the carburetor that came with the original Jeep, and it had to have custom throttle pedal cabling done, and it's running the Ford style 2-barrel rather than the original single barrel, and it runs pretty good. And the guy says it's torquey as get. Oh, it also has a 5-speed transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of the Speedo being cable driven, he has the GPS, which was actually the easiest thing to hook up.
Right.
And then we got into the last thing is everybody going, man, can you do something about the fact that this gas tank, we smell gas. Do we have a leak? No, we don't have a leak. Where's your charcoal canister? Where's your evaporative control system? Where's your PCV valve? It left. Part of it left with the old chassis, and part of it didn't come with the new chassis and engine. So I went back and did some studying for another couple hours and looked up all the different evap systems to find one that didn't need computer control, because I didn't have a computer to control it, that didn't need a thermostatic vacuum control valve, because I don't have one of those available, and you can't buy them anymore. So let's go back to the basic one, which it turns out was we had a canister for. We had to get a new rollover valve. And for those that don't know, your Jeeps, particularly in the CJ series, in the driver's rear fender, well, I guess you'd call it the rear quarter panel in the back, right behind the taillight, way up in there is where the vent lines go up to a valve assembly or pair of valve assemblies that if you roll your Jeep over, shut off the fuel flow so it doesn't come pouring out of the vent lines and obviously doesn't catch fire while you're hanging upside down in your safety straps.
Yeah.
And then it goes from there up to the canister, the driver's feet, which then connects to the PCV system, connects up to the carburetor bowl vent, and to get the vapors there. And then finally goes into the same vacuum line by the instructions that feed your distributor's vacuum advance. And if you don't know what that is, you're young. Surprisingly enough, after the first run-in with the system, the entire aroma went away. And people were like, oh, it doesn't smell anymore. I was like, yeah. And so that's been the latest trials and tribulations. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't a trial or tribulation. It was a heck of a lot of fun. I enjoyed the challenges of, melding a combination of one manufacturer's product with another manufacturer's product with some of the leftover bits and pieces, created our own systems. Like I had to go to GM and figure out for their hi-hat distributors, how much amperage do you pull and how do you wire this safely? And it came back that you get a 40 amp relay system and you trigger it with your low current from your ignition switch. And oh, by the way, don't put a fuse in line. Pull, because the distributor will put out enough, I guess the pulses are strong enough to create the equivalent of electrical friction to overheat and pop a fuse. Yeah. So you're supposed to just use a fusible link, which is just a smaller gauge of wire. So you take the fuse link piece of wire, which is usually 3 to 4 inches of a certain gauge, usually 2 gauges smaller, and you crimp it and heat seal it to the regular line, which we use 10 gauge, to the relay, and then the relay to the distributor power feed. And you know what? It worked.
Nice.
It worked. So that was kind of fun, and it was very fun to work with the owner. And I'm giving him all the pages that I pulled up and printed out and marked up. And I told him, I said, understand, sir, I said, this is your owner's manual now. Yeah, yeah. You are not going to get a Chilton's on a 85 CJ8 with components from, a 90-something with this and that and the other thing with this wiring system. And I said, the only way you stand a chance of having somebody look at this later is to have all these references. And so he's like, I'm going to bind them up and put them together. And I said, that's probably a good idea.
No, that's a very
So
good
anyway,
idea.
that was the fun for my last couple of weeks. How about you, Scott?
Well, not much on my end to report. I did finally put a new because Kevin and I have talked before about how I drilled out my the PCV valve on my LJ, and I actually did find out through a forum that there is a replaceable one you can buy. It was like less than $6 to get all the parts off Amazon, and so now I'm happy to report my idle is now 700 RPM on the LJ, so that got rid of that check engine light. It's back to the way it was, and again, it's so far it's kind of fun to drive because I wasn't running the air conditioning because that was the only way I could keep the idle from rocketing out of control was have the air conditioning on. Now down here in Florida, when it's 38 degrees and you're running the air conditioning, it's a bit brutal, So I decided to go ahead and put that valve in, so that kind of helped out. Another thing too, I was kind of like perusing the Facebook and all that, and a lot of people are asking about the Baxter Performance adapter, asking about dry starts. And it came across an interesting thread where, again, Kevin and I just recently talked about this, but we talked about engine oil. And I, the typical thread, hey, what is everyone's oil running? And I said, well, I'm using 5W20. And everyone's kind of like, oh, you really shouldn't do that. Other people are like, why? I'm using the 1540 Rotella. And I'm like, what? The Gladiator? 5W30s and all these kind of things. And, someone asked me why I chose 520. And I was kind of right, but kind of wrong. Kevin kind of helped me guide. He guided me on a website that he found. But I was always, I read a thread talking about the PSI of the film strength on the oil. And I kind of got my numbers confused. So Kevin kind of like, we took a dive and he found a really cool website. It's, what was it? Energy, whatever.
All right, folks. Yeah. It is a government website, but
Right.
it is a legal one for you to go look at. It's HTTPS, two T's, www.energy.gov/energy saver /motor oil grades and classifications explained with hyphen dashes between that whole thing. But if you Google it, it is a publication by the government, somebody I actually know, the Energy Department, all right? And they work with the Petroleum Institute, better known as API.
Right.
And if you guys have opened up and looked at the cans of oil, excuse me, that shows I'm old. Okay, the little plastic bottles of oil.
Right.
And they have a little donut ring on them that says API service and 2 letters. And in the middle of it, and it says resource conserving on the bottom. And then in the middle, it says SAE, a number, W, whiskey, dash, and another number. All right. And you all know when we talk about 020, those are the numbers, or 1030, which is the old standby, or any other combination thereof. And this website goes into explaining what the numbers mean. And the thing with Scott's, that he was looking at, and the people that were posting, their minds were in the right area, but they weren't quite getting it right.
Right.
And we've gone on this before, but I'm going to hit it again one more time. But I'm trying to be quick. The service donut contains 3 pieces of information. And that's what's kind of important, is that people are only getting 2 of the 3. Number 1, the 2 numbers that everybody talks about, SAE 0W-20. All right. First off, let's start with the fact that there's a lot of bottles out there that don't say SAE and don't have the W. That's a registered governmental test and approval that has to be approved through the American Petroleum Institute. So the oils must meet and be proven to meet these standards. Mm-hmm. So if you buy a bottle of some no-name oil that just says 5-20, it may not be an API certified oil.
Right.
And who knows what that 520 actually means. That could be how many days the bottle sat in somebody's garage. But regardless, so let's start off. It should always, in that center ring, SAE, Society of Automotive Engineering, and then the first number. It fairly simply means that the first number, whether it's a 0, 5, 10, 15, 25, is indicative of how the oil will flow at low temperature. And it's always followed by a W.
Right.
So that's the only thing that means. All right. It's just that if I have a 0 weight oil, just straight 0 grade, at freezing temperature, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, the oil, the straight grade will flow so many poisies per second.
Right.
That's how, it'll flow down. And that if you have a multigrade that has a 0W, even though it's a multigrade, it will behave at 32 degrees exactly like a straight weight 0. That's all it means.
Yeah.
Nothing else. It doesn't talk to you about shear strength. It doesn't talk to you about severity of use. All it's telling you is its viscosity. And it's also similar. Okay, that's the funny thing, the punchline. It's similar to a straight weight. The other one, the one without a letter, -20, that's the high temperature number. That means it will not get thinner at operating temperature than a straight 20 weight. All right. So if you have an engine that's running at, well, let's pick on George, 240 degrees.
Right.
The multi-weight 020 won't get any runnier than a straight 20 weight oil. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yep.
Okay. That's what those numbers mean. Now, they really don't have a whole lot of talking about shear strength, which is the ability of the oil to maintain its body in that fractional gap between the crank and the bearing surface, or the
Cam lifter
connecting
lobes.
rod and the pins, and those kinds of things. That is your service indicator. And that goes to that outside ring, and it's the API service level. And this is one that also gets people in a lot of trouble. There are, at this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 service levels. And those 9 service levels, let's see here. The current one is SP, and it's introduced in May 2020, and it does. Here's what the statements are, right out of the American Petroleum Institute Engine Oil Classifications. SP, introduced in May 2020, designed to provide protection against low speed, pre-ignition, timing chain wear protection, improved high temperature deposit protection for pistons and turbochargers, and more stringent sludge and varnish control. API SP with resource conserving matches these different standards, combining with the performance for improved economy, emission control systems, and protection of engine operating on ethanol containing fuels up to E85. So if you're doing a multi-fuel and you actually use a multi-fuel, you better be running SP.
Yeah.
SN is current as well, but it's for 2010 and older automotive engines only. Now, you can always run SP in anything, but you shouldn't run SN in something later than 2011 and newer. So that's a pretty big chunk of production if you think about it. And same thing, you can go to SM. That's a current one for 2010 and older as well, without all of the protection, the additional things that are in the SNs. SLs, 2004 and older. SJ, 2001 and older. Now, here's the key. SH, SG, SF, SE, SD, SC, SB to SA are all obsolete, and they are not recommended to be used. But they're still out there in the marketplace. So these are things, there's a whole section here on the C rates, which are the diesel oils as well. It's got a similar thing. So to use the right oil, you need to look in your manual, and you'll actually go into your owner's manual. And if you don't have an owner's manual, I'm sure you can get one online. I've pulled many of them up.
Yep.
You will see that right in that book, as soon as you go to the oil section, they got the API donut for your engine, and it has it very clearly marked. What is your service level, minimum service level? Remember, you can always go up. You just don't want to go down. You don't want to get older service level. So from that perspective, you do want to run the oil that you can. Now, you can dig in a lot deeper than that. You can go to the manufacturer's data, and they can tell you what their shear strengths are. And but unless you're really a lubrication engineer to understand what that is, here's the funny thing is it's essentially how much stress the oil can take before the molecules begin to break down and form sludge. And what's your engine need? Because if you make it too strong, the oil adds drag, which lowers fuel economy. So you really want to get what goes to your engine.
Yeah.
So those of us in the older 4-liter straight sixes, that stopped in 06, we can pretty much burn anything now, run anything through it. And we're not going to risk ruining the bearings. However, you've got a modern 2024 Gladiator. I'd keep a real close on that service, and it'd probably be an SP would be my guess.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. If you read the manuals, they do tell you that. I challenge anybody to, I'm sure there's a few out there that go, yeah, I've read my manual for lubrication. Most of it, just take it to Jiffy Lube. But you know what? You won't scare them sometime. Walk into Jiffy Lube. So what else do you have? Do you have the API? Let me see the API donut on what you're doing, because they buy it in the big bulk containers. And they go, well, yeah, because what if I don't think most of the main chains like a Jiffy Lube would skimp on that, but you never know. I don't know. I don't understand what Jiffy Lube, if they're franchisees and can buy their own oil, or if they must use their components. So those are all the quality control things. But since engine oil really is the lifeblood of your engine, I tend to pay pretty high attention to it. People always ask me, so why do you always run Rotella T6? Because it meets or exceeds every single API standard today. And the same thing for the cars. I run Mobile One. Why? Is it cost more? Yes. Do you have to run it? No. I choose to, because it's easier than worrying. Yeah, causes less ulcers too.
Well, that's why, like in the Gladiator, I ran Mobile One, and then again recently I switched to Royal Purple. Because
there's nothing wrong. Yeah, that's another synthetic.
It's another synthetic. But again, I ran the 0W20 till right about 75,000, and that's when I switched to 5W20 because it got a little noisy in the bottom end a little bit, and that's kind of helped
because you've got more bearing space. So the slightly thicker oil at those temperatures will probably help a little bit. Not kind of like the old days when we used to throw the can of motor honey in there.
Kind of like
kind of had to stick the spout in, stick it in the thing, and go away and come back the next morning, and half the can would be in the engine. But give it time.
That's pretty much what I do, because the LJ gets the red Valvoline high mileage, but before I do anything, I get one bottle of the STP Blue with the zinc additive.
Okay.
And I know I'm paying a price with my
red
catalytic
and
converters.
Blue make green, right?
Yes, absolutely. But I religiously do that, and that's what I use in the LJ, because again, I kind of beat it like a red mule. But those F-head style engines, those are hardened cam lobes. They don't have the zinc like they used to in the motor oil. Again, I did just enough research to get myself dangerous. But again, I weighed the pros and cons of the risk. I'm still running 5W30 inside, or sorry, 10W30 inside the LJ, which is an approved oil, because I know it says 530 on the cap.
Absolutely approved.
So I'm using one bottle of STP and the Valvoline high mileage, and then pretty much that's it, and that's all I run in the LJ. Well, but now I'm going to go look at all my SP things in the back of my oil containers right now, because now you have me freaking out.
You're going to go look at the
yes, I am.
The API.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it's the API service donut is. A lot of information is there, and it always surprises me. And granted, I am a mechanic geek as an engineer. It's just one of those things that's inbred into me. And no, I didn't have too many days. No, I shouldn't say that. But the information is there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see the no-name products and how they try to make you think that they've got the documentation on the bottle. But when you look close, it's not actually the API service. Yeah. Because if they get caught that way, the energy, U.S. Department of Energy and the Department of Justice will be visiting.
God, you almost got me there, guys. This bottle says PAI.
Yeah, PII service. Yes, no. So
you don't want the API to turn to a PDA.
Yeah,
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not. You're not. But anyway, folks, that's kind of the way it has run here for the last couple of weeks. It's been, like I said, kind of tech busy. We're also trying something new.
Yes.
We'll have to see if you guys figure it out. That we are now not co-located at the moment for this show. This is an experiment in a new recording method that allows me to be over here, let's call it east by southeast Florida, and Scott is more in the I'm sorry, west. I'm sorry. Listen to me. I'm thinking you and talking me. I'm over here in the west by southwest side of Florida, not too far from Tampa, but not quite to Mouseland. And you're on the other side of the big ears, and
I'm almost where I-4 ends.
Yeah, almost up there. Well, he's not that far from where the candles that have been going up into the sky most every night around here.
It went off last night, and I'm not gonna lie to you. For a second there, I thought someone was on the roof again. I'm like, "What the heck's going on here?" So now I've learned. When I start hearing the boom, I'm like, "All right, what is going on?" Oh, Falcon 9's going up. Okay, cool.
Falcon 9 going up. Yep. It's cool, folks, to live down here because I'm all the way on the other side of the state, less maybe 60 miles to the actual water on the Gulf. But I can see the launches all the way over here, and I can only think what it must be like to live close enough that it is rattling your windows in your house.
Feel it.
Because Elon's been punching those suckers out at least weekly, sometimes 2 a week.
Dude,
definitely.
Yeah, right around the last time I had it up there, I literally had the flashlight up on the roof, shaking like the old man at the cemetery, going, "What's going on here? I got the snake on my roof or something." I expected a monster to come flying down and eat me, but it turns out it was the rocket launch or something like that, and
the Falcons. Well, the Falcon Heavy, you could feel it all the way across the state when it went off.
Yeah, no, that
how many 21 engines or something like that? I forget what it is. It's just like
it sounds like the neighbor had bad Taco Bell, but
You're going to get us sued yet.
Hey, can't be sued by the mouse now. That's public domain now. Bring it.
Only Steamboat Willie.
That's okay. Just got to give it a few more years.
Yeah. Hey, I'm very happy with our mid-state resident and their businesses, because that's one of the reasons we don't have state income tax down here in the peninsular state.
Yeah, the Great Sandy South. You can't say Great White North. It's Great Sandy South.
Yeah, that's true.
Selling seashells by the seashore. What do we got?
Well, and the gators that come up and nibble on your tires, and that's kind of fun thing.
Hey, if they're cold, you're cold, they're cold. Bring them inside.
Yeah.
Don't bring them inside. Don't bring them inside. Do not touch the gators.
Anywho.
Yes.
We're hanging in there, folks. Planning on the next few trips, trying to decide to, which events are coming up here, because we got notices that they've started issuing passes for Jeep Beach and Fun in the Sun, not much in the Run. There's a few things over there, but pretty much it's people running around with not much clothing on, much younger than I am, driving up and down the beach, trying to rust their Jeeps out in a 3-day event, or 4-day event, whatever it is now, while consuming mass quantities of
stupid juice,
yeast enacted stupid juice. Yes. Yeah. So I shouldn't say that. It's a lot of fun to go to that event, folks. And if you can get down here, it is a blast. But good luck trying to find a hotel now.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's a lot of fun. We got some stuff coming up. One of the things will like to bring up, and guys, email us or comment whatever you think. With our new medium that we are recording on, we might be able to do video a little easier. Does this interest you? Do you mind? Do you care? I mean, it's one of those things we did
early
videos
on,
for a while.
Yeah, this is the one where you just look at my white beard and thinning hair, with earmuffs on and a microphone that right now the cover split, so it kind of looks like I'm talking into the backside of a Dracula.
Darth microphone. I find your lack of audio disturbing.
And Scott's over there still wearing his flapping penguin shirt from work.
And my head is so oily now it's reflecting light. So it's like a polished up cue ball.
One of the things we were thinking about doing, and it's just again an idea toss out there, is we are working through a Skype medium, and we have a seemingly high enough audio resolution and equipment that we might be able to open the channel up and have some group podcasts and see if we have some folks that might want to chime in. If you have headphones and some sort of a microphone that provides an audio quality that we can understand you. Doesn't have to be, studio level, but doesn't hurt. As well as some sort of a camera system. So if you're going to look at our face, we want to see yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other rule is that you must be wearing pants and clothes.
Please.
This is not that kind of podcast.
No, this is a family-friendly podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
But for those of you that have seen some of the few videos that we put out earlier on at requests, as well as some of the videos that we made of builds and things that we worked on, we're not exactly faces for TV.
Yeah.
We're good faces for radio and podcasting.
Yeah.
But we are what we are.
Yeah, and if you guys do decide you really want the videos, it's not going to be graphics and cool effects and all that. It's going to be bare bones, just us in front of the microphone, because we're busy now. So,
well, you are.
Yes,
I'm still just doing my pro bono volunteer, kind of go help people out of stuck situations, and I don't mean stuck in the ground.
Yeah,
it's funny. I get far less calls to go pull people out of dirt than I do to have them pull out of. No, I can't say that word.
Yeah, I was going to say. You sure you want to say that? Because
no, I can't.
You've been helping a lot of people.
Let's say fix errors in judgment. So,
Kevin, I needed a dog.
Well, I've heard those, and I've heard the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. I don't know where this thing gets plugged in.
Yeah.
Literally today, I got one of those. I stopped in and was at a shop, and they looked at me. Oh, since you're here, okay, what are we doing? See these wires? Where do they go? I can't say that.
Nice.
But the truth was, yeah, I figured it out. Hooked them up for him and said, there. We're there. You're still missing that ground strap. Do I have to? Only if you want it to run.
You spent all this money on nice, cool parts. Let's make them work correctly, shall we?
Yes, shall we?
Anyways, I think
from
it's... Oops, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. You're saying the same thing.
I was going to say, I started. I want to go ahead and pull the plug and end it. But the fun thing with the Skype thing is now if you could get a chance to stand really still, but you can't do it. It almost looks like the screen freezes. I almost thought about doing that to Kevin, but that wouldn't be nice.
You did that earlier. You were sitting there with your head kind of cocked back, and all of a sudden you a bit pixelated. The camera gave up on you.
Exactly. Come on. Again, we have the face for radio. But I guess that's enough talking. I think it's time we lock the hubs and put the Jeep in 4-low. What do you think, Kevin?
I think that worked well for me, too, although right now, since we're just in the equivalent of Florida winter, down to 62 degrees. Brr.
Saturday's supposed to be cold.
Yeah, so anyway, we appreciate y'all for listening in. We hope you tune in another 2 weeks for the next episode, which will be 202. And otherwise, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.